Okay, let me start. Okay, so now we will see how do you run multiple test cases in TestNG. Right. So yesterday we have seen how do you run a single test case. Now let's say I am having couple of test cases in a single class. Then how do you run that? Right. So in my yesterday's discussion, we have created a method called title verify, and then we launched this google.com, and then we got the title, and then finally we used assert command to validate that, right? Let's say I am having couple of methods, or in a way, let's say I want this WebDriver to be initialized in a separate method, right? So mostly we write a method called public void setup method, right? So setup nothing but you are setting up your browser, and for closing your browser you write like @test public void tear down. Okay, so you write like this. So in this setup method I will set up my browser. These all commands I'll mention there. Right, so let me just copy paste here. So setup will set up your browser, and then so system set property, new Chrome driver, then manage windows, and then page load timeout. Okay, and here I am just launching my browser, and then I am verifying the title. So for title verification, driver dot get title, and let's say string title, and I am using assert dot assert equal my actual is title and expected is Google. Okay, so this test I have written here, and in my tear down method I will close my driver. Okay, so driver dot close. Simple, right? And I will have to declare WebDriver now at the class level or as a instance variable, because I will be using WebDriver throughout my class, right? In my studies class, I used the WebDriver I declared a WebDriver within that single method only, right? Now tell me, what would be the execution flow? I mean, in your manual testing, if you talk about manual testing, what should be the execution flow? It should be like first your setup method is triggered, and then your this test is triggered, and then your tear down method should be triggered, right? That's the normal flow.
Correct. Yeah. Yes.
First setting up your browser, then your test, and then tear down, right? But in TestNG, if you specify all the methods with @test annotation, then all would be considered as test only, right? And by default, the execution happens in the alphabetical order, right? So alphabetical order as in the alphabetical order of the method name. So here, so setup would come first, right? Because S comes first, and in title and tear down will come later. Next, right? Second would be the tear down, and then title verify. So that would be my order here. If I execute that, it would be my order here. So my this test would be failed. Okay, let's see what is happening here. Yeah, so you could see that, right? First setup was executed, then tear down, and then title verify. And it says no such session exception because a driver was closed already, right? We closed the driver already, and because of that, your method got this test was not executed, right? So for that, as of now, what I can do, I can just change the name of this, right? So st, so instead of this, let me put such name wherein it falls between these two methods. SP. So let what could be the name? So let's say I am writing like Google verification, verify. Okay, and here let's say I am changing the name to browser setup. Okay, so your this test will execute first, then your this test will come into picture, and then this, right? Alphabetically they are fine, right? If I
Yes.
run this, it would be in the order in which we want. Okay, so your all three test cases are passed this time, and you can see the report here. In console also it says 3 out of 3 pass, no failure. Okay, so likewise, if I am having further test cases in my TestNG class, then how would I do that? So I can use the priority method there, right? So let's say I am having instead of this, I am having like title verify only, right? So I can, what I can do, guys, to execute this method on the second priority, I will have to define the priorities here. So I can write like priority equal to 1 for this priority, okay, and then for this priority 2, and for this priority 3. So all the test cases would be executed in this priority only. So priority 1 being the highest would be executed first, priority 2 second, and priority 3 third, right? So this is one way we can resolve that issue, even if there is a mismatch in the titles, mismatch in the method names, right? So this will help you to execute test cases in the order in which you want, right? So likewise you can do this. Okay, so if I am having more methods, then I can prioritize them accordingly. On this priority part, so by default the priority for all the methods are 0. Okay, so you can make down this point because they do ask in the interview. By default the priority of all the methods are 0. Priority, default priority is 0, and if you don't specify priority, then test cases are picked up on the basis of their alphabetical order. If no priority found, then test cases are picked up alphabetical order. Okay, now let's say I am having some priority like priority 1 2 3 2 3 4. Likewise, let's say instead of 1 I am starting my priority from 10, and then next priority would be 11 or 12, or let's say 12, and then this one is 13, right? So obviously the sequence would be like starting from lower priority to the higher priority, right? Even though you specify 1 2 3 10 11 12 10 20 30, so priority would be like lower to higher, right? So that's for positive priority. If I am having something called negative priority here, then what will happen? Which test case will you pick first? So here let's say I am having -1 and then 2 and then 4. Then which test case would we pick first, guys?
First will be browser setup.
So you are you are right here. So the lowest the priority, that test case would be picked first for the execution. So they do ask in the interview, right? So to confuse you, how do you how the TestNG picks up the test cases? So the simple concept here is the lowest the priority, the test case will be executed first, right? And let's say for some of the test cases I'm not defining any priority, and for some of the test cases I am defining priority. Then what will happen?
Where the priority is not set, it should be executed first because by default it will be 0.
Hmm.
So -1 will execute first, then 0, and
then positive one,
the
right?
fourth positive one.
So in that case, what you can say, whatever the test cases are not having priority, let's say there are 5 test cases which are not having priority. So for each of the test cases, the priority would be 0. And let's say for some of the test cases, the priority is minus, and for some of the test cases, the priority you are defining in the positive integer number, right? So negative ones in what order? In that ascending order, right? Would be executed first. And then whatever the priorities are, for whatever the method the priority is not there, for those cases the test would be run on the alphabetical order, right? And
Yes.
for the remaining ones, positive ones, again the ascending order. Okay, so it's pretty simple. If you are having priority, then obviously from lowest to highest. If no priority, then alphabetical orders would be picked up. Okay, so we can see this also here. Let me just give you one more example. Let's say I am having this -1 priority and this is 4, and let's say I am having one more method here which is having somewhere and this time let me take as verify title method, and here instead of this, let's say I am taking ICICI bank.com and let it be fail. Okay, so this is -1, so it should be picked first, right? And then this would be, what would be the priority? Set default priority for this would be 0, and between these two, right, which method would be picked first, guys?
Title verify.
Title verify, right? And then this one, right, verify title, and finally priority 4 would be picked, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's run this. Okay, so my three out of the 4 test cases would be passed and 1 would be failed because we are deliberately making this fail. Okay, so browser setup first, title verify second, verify title third, and then tear down 4. All right, and where we got assertion error, expected Google but found personal banking and net banking service online, ICICI Bank, right? So that's the concept behind this, right? So alphabetical order, if not alphabetical order, then priorities would be picked up. Okay, so likewise we can have priorities. The next is your TestNG annotations, I would tell you, right? So annotations, do you know what is annotation?
That @ test is an annotation.
At the rate is an annotation.
Okay.
Okay, so @test overall is a TestNG annotation, I would say. So okay, so let's understand the annotation first, and then we will discuss, or let's cover these all depends on method, single test case, multiple time, and all that. Okay, so here let's say I want to run a single test case multiple times. Okay, how would I do that in TestNG? So for that we have one method called invocation count, and here whatever the count I give, whatever the count I give, that specific test case would be executed that time. Okay, so let's remove this, and then let me put assert here, driver.close here, and then let's put this also. Okay, so as of now I am having only one method, and let me remove this and then this. Okay, so I am having only one method in which I am just initializing my WebDriver, and then I am navigating to google.com and then fetching the title, and then I am validating the title and then closing the driver, right? So let's run this and see whether we are able to execute this test case 10 times or not. Yeah, it is done, right? So title verify was executed 10 times, and you can see the report for each test case, right? So passed, total test run, and overall there were only one test case, but those test case was run 10 times. Okay, so invocation count is the name of the method which you can use to run a single test case multiple times. Okay, so invocation count, invocation count. And that should be provided along with your @test annotation. Okay, next is your depends on method. Okay, so let's say I am having couple of methods in my TestNG class, and let's say my methods are dependent on each other, as in dependent as in, like, if my first method is passed, then only my second method should be considered for execution. Likewise, let's say for an example, if I talk about some real scenario, let's say I'm able to launch my browser, and then only I can navigate to that URL, or maybe I am able to navigate to that URL to the login page, and then only I can input the username or password. So my inputting username or password method would be dependent on navigating to that login page. If at all I am not able to navigate to that login page, my this test case inputting username or password should be skipped or should not be considered for execution. So for that we have one methods in TestNG, method in TestNG depends on. So depends on method and method name, right? So whatever the method you are inputting this depend on method, that would be dependent on this method name. Okay, so for an example, let's say let me do some modification here only. So browser setup, and in my second method, let's say I am writing like public void verify title, and here I am writing like all this. Okay, and let me remove this, and then @test, and this method is dependent on my previous method, browser setup. So if my browser is setting up properly, then only I can verify the title, right? So depends on method equal to method name, and that method name should be within your double quotes. Depends on methods. Okay, so this method is dependent on my previous method. Okay, so let's run this and see what is the behavior now, and then we will make that first test case has failed. Okay, so as of now my both the test cases are getting executed because my first test case was passed, right? And if this is passed, then only my second test case was picked up for execution. Let's say if I make this test case fail, deliberately fail. So for that, what I can do, assert equal, not assert equal, assert true, assert true. So this assert true will actually check if the given condition is true or false. If it is true, then your test case would be considered as pass. If it is false, then your given test case would be considered as false. So deliberately I am making this false. So my first test case would be would be failed in this case, and then second test case would be skipped from execution. So let's run this and see. Though I am launching the browser and then navigating to URL, but because of this statement, I have made my test cases failed, right? And then you can see that, this test case was marked as failed and this was skipped from execution. If you see the console here, total 2 test cases run, one was failed and second was skipped, right? So depends on method is useful there. Disha, Sitara, any confusion here?
So can you repeat this once more? Like depends on methods is basically dependent on another method.
Yeah, dependent on this method, browser setup. And if my browser setup is passed, then only this would be considered for execution.
Okay. And if this fails, this won't be considered, it will be skipped.
It
And
would
we
be
have
skipped.
okay, so if we have 3 methods, browser setup, this is second method, we have third method, and the second method is dependent on first method. And if it executes, first one will run, which will be false. So this will fail. Second would be skipped. What about the third one?
Third one would be executed if that is not dependent on any method.
Dependent on, okay.
Okay, so let's see that also. So let's say I am having another method, right? So instead of this, let me just change the name here, title1. And let's say I am again trying to execute. This driver.close will have to be skipped, otherwise, okay, it won't be executed anyways, right? Okay, so let's run this. Okay, can you see the difference, Sitara? So my browser setup was executed first. It was failed because we have written this line. This browser title, verify title was skipped from execution because it was dependent on this method. And this verify title one was executed and it was successful.
Okay, yeah. So one pass, one fail, and one skip.
One pass, one fail, one skip.
Okay, understood.
Okay, so